the outside mind washing the internal mind in apparent conflict, afflictive scenarios as beneficial circumstances for mind-to-mind cleaning of self-nature. We have some announcements. Devin Larratt has defeated Vitaly Laletin, which puts him in the running for the trifecta for #1 arm wrestler in the world against Levon Savazhinishvili, possibly in December. It was an incredible match. I also serendipitously, because I haven't had much sleep these past couple days, somehow I fell asleep at about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and woke up at about 7 a.m., was able to watch the match with Devin and Vitaly, and also have a short Zoom meeting conference with Gilbert Gutierrez, one of the well-known advisors, one of the Dharma heirs of Shifu Shengyen. And that was very positive and good to speak with that person. Not following any particular kind of script or predetermined way of evaluating the emptiness, the right view as not someone, not something, not somewhere, not some thought-based paradigm. Not based in a way of seeing ourselves or a way of seeing others. Not based in a way of interpretation. Not interpreting the data in front of us, not interpreting anything. Buddhism, to see the emptiness of oneself. To see the emptiness of other selves, which actually are just illusions. If yourself, your idea of yourself, your story, your movie, your internal movie is just an illusion. In the same way, these people are just illusions. Now, how does that work? It works through your process of individuation, to see through your own eyes, to stop pretending that we can empathize with the director, the creator, the producer, the costume artist, etc., etc., etc. There's something magical about, just to share. Really like this guy. I'm a big fan of this guy. Uh, I think he has very, very high level understanding, and he has a technical understanding as well, which you can't think yourself to in Buddhism, which is kind of maybe a taboo topic. And I want to share this guy's whole deal with you. His name, Gilbert. American Chan Master. Here's the Guru Viking interview. I mean, I really dislike this Guru Viking guy for whatever reason, but here's the interview. Why don't we watch it? What else? Are we doing something better than that? We as in, nobody.
In this episode, I am joined by Gilbert M. Gutierrez, Chan Buddhist teacher and a Dharma heir of Master Sheng Yen. Gilbert recounts his early childhood mystical and meditation experiences, his deep dive into closed-door internal martial arts and Neigong systems, and the special abilities he both witnessed and unlocked. Gilbert describes the unusual circumstances leading up to meeting Taiwanese Chan master Sheng Yen, and how an arduous meditation retreat and a powerful encounter with Kuan Yin changed his life forever. Gilbert also discusses exorcisms, ghosts, and vexing spirits, and tell stories of the pitfalls of using spiritual healing to sustain terminally ill patients. So without further ado, Gilbert M. Gutierrez. Gilbert Gutierrez, welcome to the podcast.
So there you go. If you want to watch that, you go and watch that. I'd like to take another look at Alexis non-duality. Okay, so that's Gilbert M. Gutierrez as a possible target.
So, in the light of all of this, whatever dynamically appears to be happening, there's nothing to achieve. There's nothing to accomplish. There's nothing to own. There's nothing to have or hold on to. There's nothing to relinquish or let go of either. There's nothing to get rid of in this absolute. Not in the world of practicality with bodies and their personal or whatever other situations might show up, but there's just naturally what appears to be happening. In that totality, there are no levels.
What? What did Alexis just say? The no-show got canceled. The no-show got deleted. And I would say that I was a major part of that. All right, here we go. What did Alexis just say here? Seems like that's not correct in this framework.
Nothing to accomplish. There's nothing to own. There's nothing to have or hold on to. There's nothing to relinquish or let go of either. There's nothing to get rid of in this absolute. Not in the world of practicality with bodies and their personal or whatever other situation.
Well, there's your duality right there. That's fake non-duality, as I've called it all along. This is fake non-duality. It's a show, right? It's a fake show of non-duality, and there's your evidence right there.
Situations might show up, but there's just naturally what appears to be happening. In that totality, there are no levels or layers or dimensions to personhood. There's no progression to or away from being me or less of a me or anything like that. There's only this, stripped of context and stripped of storyline. There's just what is appearing to happen. You can't take a reality in the storyline if it's not perceived as actually linear. Like if there is just this right now, not even now, but this right now, of just talking and listening, sitting in a room, sensation, vibration, perception, it just is. It just simply is. There's no one living that as a personal revelation or an experience. There's no one who reaches that as a state, because it's timeless. It can't. So the timelessness of it can't be reached. You can't be practicing this or processing this. All practices and processes are just in their own sort of momentous kind of reality. But when there's just simply what appears to be happening, there's no sense of a goal in sight or mind. Hey. Drunk on San Pellegrino.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really too simple for language. I mean, as Tobias also said, it's like to give an introduction about this can seem actually really quite humorous, because it's almost as though it looks like we're talking about something in particular, and that just isn't really the case. And no one has this, and no one's not got this. It just is this. And no perception betrays that. And what I mean by that is that if it seems really convincingly like there is a sense of here-ness, in a way, it's an unconditional so what? An unconditional so what that says, well, okay, if that's what appears to be happening, that's what appears to be happening. That's not an obstacle. That's not something that's right or wrong. It's not something that should be gotten rid of. It just is what it is. So, you know, when people say, well, I still feel like a me, or I still feel like there's a here-ness, or you know, I'm still having this traumatic experience, or I'm getting triggered, or it's like it's kind of looking for some kind of validation that there is actually a problem and there is actually a solution to that, and this isn't actually as real as it seems to be in the linear sense, and in the spatial sense, and in the sense of comparison and distinction. Making distinctions between this person and that person, for example. Like this person has got more.
Yeah, but that's, you're saying that as you make a distinction, so that would seem to be not. If you're going to be saying it anyway, why would you do it this way? What's your reason for doing it this way? Because it does seem to be that you're doing it a particular way, in a very coarse way. Very obviously, it seems to be a very particular way that you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, or whatever it is nobody's doing. So why are you doing it that way? You can't answer that. Well, that's a question that you can't answer. So that would bring up some incorrectness for me, and then there's certain questions that aren't allowed that are specifically about this scope of what you're saying you're doing, or what, clearly you're trying to do. Just going into the reeds and the weeds is, well, it's necessary to see through them. You can't see through the reeds anyways. Well, to say it appears is also problematic. What appears? Where does it appear? So this is the shallow dynamic, right? And so this is it's a false representation of Pyth instructions and a Pyth position as well, a Pyth positionless position, if you ask me. You don't just get all, and this is the protest, this is the problem, right? The fundamental positionality of taking no position. And sure, it's not necessarily worthwhile or not worthwhile to talk about this and emptiness and all that jazz. Just like there's no need to fight. But there's winners and losers in this world. There's no reason to like it or dislike it, but there's a like, there's a dislike, apparently. And that's when you get a hold of them, and depends on what era you're in. But in the old eras, you get a hold of them, you turn them upside down, you hang them from their ankles on a wooden post, and you skin them alive as a witch. So you want to be careful about your absolutism, your faux absolutism, if you ask me, because it's not going to work that well. It works in certain conditions, but it won't work in certain other conditions. That's not to say that you're not an illusion. It's to say that all things are illusionary by nature. And that's a matter of insight, not thinking about it, not getting it, not understanding it. No grasping and no rejection. So I'm seeing a lot of grasping and rejection in this. But I is an illusion. So what's the point of putting so much value in the I that sees this or sees that? That's problematic. So it's just shallow waters bring well, it's true, right? You're not going to find swaths of mosquito larvae in the middle of the ocean, the deep, rich ocean. You're going to find swaths of mosquito larvae in still, shallow ponds. And who says mosquito larvae are bad?
More or less, that person's got more. It's just, what else is there? What else is there? What else could there be?
It's almost more like an art project. And if you're an artist, you're going to have to compete with the sky. And if you want to compete with the sky, you better be ready to collaborate and communicate about, what it is that you're doing, you're interested in, your peers. We've all got to work together. We've all got to be willing to work together. And when we don't work together, we are perpetuating a notion of separation. Now, what's that we? That's all phenomena, or that's all things, mental and physical things. You see what I'm saying there? You feel that? And that's an incorporality together with everything. That's a dynamic, you know. That's a true modality, we can say. Working together with everything. And when we don't work together with everything, we solidify our sense of self and our sense of separation. And that's not what we want to do here. We don't want to do that here. You know? I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free. Ooh.
I'm going to do the sock lying down now, aren't you?
Huh?
If you're lying down, you will not be doing the sock.
Oh, okay. No, I can sit
It
there.
can be done lying down.
Let's do that anyway.
Here we go again.
Here we go.
I like the rearrangement though. Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just double check, is the door locked? The door
I
is
think-
not locked.
Yeah, I think it's open. So, yeah, understandably, it can be perceived that to say there is no problem and there is no solution could seem like the most dismissive, cruel, heartless, unkind thing to say ever. But it's, again, it's not applied to a relative paradigm of personal landscapes, shall we say. Rather, the impersonal and absolute exposure that there is no problem and no solution is so free. There's such a freedom in that impersonal revelation that there is, again, in the absolute, there's no problem and no solution is complete liberation, because nothing is then seen as an obstacle to be resisted, nor is it seen to be a circumstance to be embraced, because it can't be related to. If it could be related to, it would be relative. But in the absolute sense, no obstacle, well then everything is dynamically, fruitfully free. And that, again, it's like we trip ourselves up in the language of that, because it even as it spills out of a body's mouth, it really looks like someone knows that maybe, or something is relating that to a situation, but it just isn't like that. It's rather the freedom that if it's pain, and if it's treatment, it's treatment. If it's anger, it's anger, and if it's breathing, it's breathing. If it's whatever, ecstatic or agonizing. So naturally there's still the appearance of care and treatment and kindness and tenderness, and there's also the appearance of pain and hardship and difficulty. But this illusory additional overlay that makes it all something complicated and intricate, like a puzzle to be solved or fixed, to be pieced together or pulled apart. There's no need for this. Yeah, this isn't actually a necessary, well, this isn't necessary for bodies in the relative to be functioning and getting on with what they're up to and the way they express themselves. It all carries on as it is, just without that illusory overlay of this is me and how am I going to deal with this. So then it's just open, It's open. There's an openness in the apparent contrast to the way it apparently once seemed, in the storyline, of course. The way it once seemed, like when it seemed like this was interpreted as being personal, and then it's just impersonal, intimate. It's an intimate, impersonal nature. No one and no thing trying to be perfect, trying to be better, trying to stay as they are. Just everything is just effortlessly being what it is, and even the effortlessness can be difficult. So in that, nobody here has shown up today as a me that might walk out being not so much of a me. It just really, really isn't like that. Yeah. Everybody gathered here is equally not a person. There might be sensations and vibrations which you know, in their nature try to assert that that's not the way it is. There might be perceptions that don't see it that way, but that too is just what's impersonally appearing to happen. This unconditional equanimity and neutrality is a disempowerment that is recklessly compassionate, because there's just no possibility of making progression or process out of this. The alreadiness kind of stops the freight train of mehood in its illusory tracks. It points out, no, this is already it. You can't go anywhere with that, and you can't stay anywhere with that. There's no orientation when already there is only the absolute, totally free in it. Abundantly wild as it is already, without a plan, without an observer, without a composer to the way in which this all appears to be. So we can chat once again about any of this. We can explore whatever seems to come up, whether it's conceptual or poetic or emotional, raw, whatever it is. It's all freedom. It's all freedom. Can't possibly get this wrong or right. There's no way of wording this correctly. There's no way of getting closer to this or achieving this, because it's already complete. And the wholeness of that is what I call the basking. I call it the basking because it's not with any direction or destination whatsoever. There already is basking, and the whole sense of there being not anything to be done about that and nowhere to go with that is just the basking. And it can be uncomfortable, of course, and it can be very comfortable, it can be very soothing, but it doesn't matter, it can just be. The basking that this doesn't need to go anywhere. No conclusion to be drawn, just this.
Can I ask something else?
Absolutely. You can ask us. No, you can say and ask as much as you want.
It's great.
Yeah, we like it.
Well, we were having a chat in the break a little bit about this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. What seems to be here is the appearance. You know, we can say, well, there's an apparent me, apparent you, apparent everyone, and as individuals. And I think sometimes the non-duality message can kind of make that even more apparent, that what we seem to have is only the appearances, and that can sometimes feel quite difficult, because there's a sense of that's quite unfair, because you know, if that's what there is, then there are people who have life-limiting illnesses, for example, you know, people who are born into poverty, people the kind of difference that people have with their lives can be painful and, you know, very unfair, but that's all there is. So it can sometimes feel quite stark and quite
Yes.
I know that's not all there is, obviously, but it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that matters a lot.
Oh yeah.
And there's that suffering and
Yeah,
pain.
yeah. The word mattering is really interesting, isn't it? Matter. Yeah. Yeah. To say nothing matters, I think, although it has a truth to it, it can also be very misleading, because when it's heard, when the words are heard, nothing matters, that definitely seems like a nihilistic cop-out. Shall we say, which would be very understandable to perceive it that way. I would prefer to say there isn't anything to matter. I think that would be clearer, even though it's still very abstract and obscure in its term. But it's pointing out it's not that there are things to not matter, because if it heard nothing matters, what gets heard there by the psychology is that there are things, but they don't matter. None of them matter. And that's much more on the nihilistic view, as it were, that there are things happening, but none of it matters. It doesn't matter at all. But the clear distinction is that, no, there aren't actually things happening to matter. There aren't actual separate things happening to matter. It would be the same with saying nothing means anything. Like to say nothing means anything, what gets heard is there are things, but they just don't have meaning. And that's the apparent fine line between in the language, which of course I'm being pedantic with. But that's the fine line between nihilism and so-called non-duality message, is this nihilistic thing over here, which is neither better nor worse, of course, because that would be dualistic as well, right? But this nihilistic thing over here is saying there are things, but they just don't mean anything, they don't matter. And this absolute exposure is saying there aren't actually things happening to matter. There aren't things happening to not matter either.
So as the parable of the wild fox spirit goes, not being blind to cause and effect, rather than there is no cause and effect. Because you say there's no cause and effect, and then I dissect your body. So you can say, well, that's not real. Well, let's see. Let's see if it's not real. But I think what struck out to me with this practitioner's question was this idea, this sense that there's something outside of this mind. That there's some reality to things or thoughts, etc., outside of this mind, outside of this immediacy. And there's no evidence of that. There's practically no evidence of that. You can't find out what's going on over there unless only accords to this experience of whatever you can see here and the over there, whatever it is. That's a very easy, practical, factual understanding to relax our cards, so to speak. And you can see that there's also it's not just what we say, it's not just what we teach, it's deeper than that. So you can see the dualistic paradigm of Alexis here answering this person's question. And I think, well or not well, who knows? It's not ultimately well or not well. It's your mind now. This is just an experience of your mind. I don't actually exist out there. Nor do I actually exist in here, which is your mind or the mind. Just in the same way that a dream doesn't actually exist even in the midst of the dream. So dropping this belief, this religion of over-there-ness, of out-there-ness is very valuable. because then you don't have to worry so much about fixing a problem that's not here. You take away the power or the credence or the gas on the fire for the ego of all of that outside or other than this. This is your mind. This is the mind. There is no other than the mind. Scientifically, factually, this is a production of the inside of your brain. And absolutely, there's no separation to begin with for a you to there's a you over here and there's something outside of that you. Just in the same way that we or you or me or everything is just as much the earth or an expression of the earth or a unseparable entity born from the earth as a tree is, or as a mountain is, literally. So it's not black or white, but this is just a matter of a deep listening, deep investigation into these principles and practices. We're not here to be superfluous, but there's some depth or subtlety that we don't have a capacity to investigate. And this Chand work or this mind work is investigatory work, not into someone else's story, but into the principles and practices that underlie the functioning of this mind, or our mind. We say my mind, my body. But just listening, you can take a little bit of a note, take a note, leave a comment, take a note, put a pin, but just the listening itself doesn't need to be based on superficial differentiation or superficial picking and choosing. You don't need to rely on that. The paper itself or the mind field itself has all of the self-releasing quality to it. So you don't need to give effort or remove effort. Just be one with the self-nature of grace. Grace with whatever. Grace with everything as it is. Happening to nobody. Just happening. And the just happening here is not a just happening of things, but the justness of happeningness that doesn't rely on thing or no thing or anything or not anything.
Yeah, because meaning is relative, you see. Meaning and mattering are relative. Again, if this is an absolute exposure, it doesn't equate. It's not like you could fit that together, right? It would be like trying to fit a mug through that oval.
And we talk about, I don't understand. Well, that's as wrong as you understanding. So you don't have to worry about that. The teacher's position in mind work is not for you to understand. Or it's just as much for you to not understand as it is for you to understand. Because we're breaking off the chains of I-ing and my-ing and selfing and identification of things to begin with. As if the ego's imagination is like a AI model that's examining the interactions of particles of all phenomena in the universe all at once. So it's just it's not something that you'd want to hang on to. There's nothing that you'd want to hang on to. And that's grace, the naturalness of that, and the natureness of that for yourself, your true self, your real self. And we don't just understand about the teachings, because if we understand or not understand about the teachings is one thing. But actually, when it's too much, or it's too much effort, or it requires too much presence, right? Then we fall back to, okay, well, I don't understand about that, but I understand about Dr. Rob. I understand about what we're doing here. I understand about me and me being here. So don't understand about that either. You know, that's also just nonsense. And that's what, you know, we push our egos out in this way that's just not. And so we need to recognize that. We need to recognize the notness of how we're pushing out. Otherwise, we're just going to be, you know, tying ourselves up in a yarn ball instead of doing some real crochet work with high quality crochet yarn or whatever.
A shaped hole in the tissue box. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna go in.
Yeah.
It's not compatible.
It just seems a bit sort of strange that, because I always identified with awareness, and I was one of those silly people who thought that there was somewhere to get, and that was who I thought I was. You know,
Sure,
I am
me
the,
too,
the
yeah.
ultimate oneness and the divine whatever, and
Yeah.
I'm going to go on forever. I'm going to live forever. And you know, when you realise that you're not that, you start thinking, oh, damn, I'm just Claire in this body, and you know, I don't mean it like that, but it can
Isn't that
almost be a bit. I don't know. It doesn't seem very satisfying.
Totally
that
understand.
conclusion.
Yeah, totally understand. Because when you're identifying as awareness, it really heightens the sense of specialness. It does, and it tends to. It's very innocent, but that, I mean, that's certainly what this had a taste of when it was really immersed in that landscape of remaining aware of being aware, and like there's something kind of sparkly about it in a sense. It sort of heightens this sense of me, even though it's not really an actuality. It just seems to offer some kind of sense of security, I think. There's an abidance in and as that, and it can feel quite comforting. And if that's being relinquished, there can be the opposite, at least initially, like something is feeling really, like dull or not so special, or I'm like losing all of my value in myself. There can be quite a despair, as sometimes called.
So this is one of the important things to understand. You don't know what's going on. You're not a scientist. You're not a Zen master. You're not a philosopher. You know, you're not even Nietzsche. You know, you're not even Friedrich Nietzsche, let alone someone who's found freedom. You know, so this illusory self, this illusory idea is always just getting things together, gathering things up together, and saying, oh, look at that. You know, well, that's proof of itself. And it doesn't actually have any proof. There's no proof to it. Nothing can be proven. And so in a situation like this, you have someone who's more or less advanced, more or less understanding, with someone else that's more or less understanding, and everybody's just making it up as they go along. So you got to watch out for that. We have to be able to work with factuality. Doesn't mean that we dissect each other's stool movements, or we, trauma dump with each other. But it does mean that there has to be a practical aspect, factual aspect to our communication with our teachers. And if that practical or factual aspect, as it relates to what we're talking about, in the most practical veins, because there's nothing practical or subtle or true about identifying with awareness. It's a platitude. It's not. There's no standardized version or definition of that. It only exists in vaguity, and so if we play off of one another's vaguity, we'll just go along on the lazy river of vagueness and misperception and generalness and seeming so for eternity. We'll never actually get anywhere. So this is just playing to someone else's ego to keep, to put some food in their stomach so that they'll leave you alone, or so that they'll say, yeah, I get it. I get that. I relate to that too. It's not difficult to do that when we're talking about such general things as my relating with awareness. I mean, can you begin to imagine the subtlety of the brain and the operations of the brain in relationship to the brain being like a fruit of a tree, literally? No, you cannot. So this is just playing pretend. This is playing pretend non-duality, keeping people at a distance, and holding on to this particular kind of language that's very self-referential, self-experience, awareness, referential, it's not actually ever going to lead anywhere. None of this is actually ever going to lead anywhere, both in the ways that we want and don't want it to, which is exactly the issue. In positioning ourselves as an absolute teacher, positioning ourselves as a Buddha, understanding right view in vague general terms of Buddhahood or whatever, awareness hood, the hood of awareness. I've got it. I've figured it out because I feel comfortable. That's what Alexis is really saying. I feel comfortable, so I've figured it out, and now I'm sharing it out to everyone here. Alexis might say, no, that's not what's being said, but now you're talking about Dr. Rob versus Alexis. And as far as I know, those, I don't know the details of it, but I've heard wind that Alexis is maybe transitory in nature. So I don't know that those, feminine chemicals are maybe doing anything for your muscle structure. I'm not saying I'm fit, but, so all of these things go together. It's relaxing the importance of being comfortable entirely. And when we haven't been challenged, when we haven't really continued to be willing to be challenged, it's not about doing a particular thing at a particular place with a particular person, but then we find comfortableness as nirvana. And that is it's not right or wrong, absolutely, but it is the essential problem for efficacy when it comes to being a Dharma teacher and, really helping all of these illusory beings.
Call it divine despair.
And does it sort of come back, but from a place of not identification, but from a place of, I don't know.
Yeah, without wanting to validate that too much, because it might make it sound like this is different to that, but this apparently disappeared. Yeah, the sense that there is an internal observer.
This apparently disappeared is just an ego judgment. It's just a thing that you could say or a thing that you could do, just like believing like the guy who transmits an alien. Anybody know that guy's name? Silent Speaks Now probably knows that guy's name if they're still here. That says that he goes into trance and he's communicating with an alien from Zepton 9. This seems to be the case. Well, sure, it seems to be the case. How convenient that your position is based on a seemingness of what someone else would ideally want to happen, for them following you around and believing in you. So it's very problematic. That doesn't mean anything. This seems to have disappeared. It doesn't mean anything. Go and perform Romeo and Juliet. Give us that seeming. Daniel Craig seems to be James Bond. And I know there's another layer to what they're saying. They're saying, actually, I'm even more enlightened than saying this seems to have disappeared. But yeah, if that was the case, then why would you say something like that? That wouldn't make any sense to say. If your realization was beyond that, you wouldn't share a lower realizational perspective with people. Not necessarily. You might. You could. But that all of this is illusory. It doesn't matter what we talk about. It's all illusory. Like a soap bubble. It appears to appear, but where did it come from and where does it go? In the deeper sense of truth, of our capacity to access truth. Don't know. So there's a lot of knowing in this.
Externally observing all of this, but also observing thoughts, like what we could call internal, whatever that would be, thoughts, ideas, internal, like sensation in the body. There isn't a sense of an observer. Disappears.
Yeah.
It goes to sleep. I really do think it's a lovely metaphor that it doesn't wake up. I mean, awakening in this respect is very quite misleading, because nothing wakes up to this reality. That whole sense of there being someone awake actually falls asleep.
And that's the issue of claiming to be a Buddha. And that's fundamentally what people like Frank Yang are doing, Angelo DeLulu are doing, Jim Newman is doing in his own way. And this is just ridiculous. So if I got a hold of Alexis and I tortured them, I don't think that they'd be able to look at me in the eyes and say, Angulimala, I've already stopped. It's you that hasn't stopped. So it's a joke. It's a game. It's a lie. It's a delusion. It's nonsense. It's total nonsense. And I'm not trying to, me and Alexis and you're watching, and so you see, oh, well, Dr. Rob's got it more figured out. No, I'm saying plainly, a Buddha has no meanness, but this lack of meanness that Alexis is talking about is actually a meanness towards the path. And a meanness of realization. They don't know what they're actually talking about. In the wrong way. Or in the right way for the ego and for their desires and their fears. So it's just nonsense. It's total nonsense. And it's a symptom of this appropriation and this colonization. These people could never colonize Buddhism because Buddhism's too powerful. It's too alive as an institution. And then they say, oh, Dr. Rob, you're not allowed to talk about this, but I'm allowed to choose to transition or identify as a woman when I was born with testicles, or I'm allowed to choose this toilet that's clean over that toilet that's full of shit and stinks just because. And anyways, we're not going to talk about that anyway because I'm not willing to talk about that. But that's also not absolute. Could be, could be Alexis is a Buddha or something like that. But probably not. It's just like my wife could attack me right now. She's over there cooking, so she has access to blades and all kinds of different things back there. But she's probably not going to. And when we are in that state of realization, it doesn't need to be a part of our platform to constantly imply that we're at this current state of realization. You know, there's no need to implicate ourselves in a particular position when we're actually far along in seeing the illusory nature of ourselves. And, you know, I always come back to this importance, this intention, this willingness to collaborate, to communicate about the things that we're passionate about for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of anyone. You know what I mean? It's a small group of people that are in this circle of Western English-speaking non-duality, and being able to take a teacher seat and being able to have people interested to hear and just show up just so you can do your art, do your sharing and be inspired, you know, have a practice. Because if you're just sitting there alone or to one viewer, well, come on, you know, maybe you go and be a fireman or something. And so these people's unwillingness to collaborate and be accessible is just, it's damning is what it is. It's totally damning. Okay, let's listen.
Into the slumber of this immediacy. Yeah, that's why I call it the void of vibrancy, because it falls asleep and then this reality is fully switched on. But there's no...
And of course, this person, I'm not here to be a lawman. I'm not a lawman of Buddhism or spirituality or whatever. But this person has all the right to make their own tradition, to do whatever they want to do. And, you know, I'm not trying to fight against them. I would try to interact with them, which is what I'm doing now. Of course, they're not willing to have a discussion about this stuff. You know, even Jim, the Arahat, seems to get quite agitated when you try to have a conversation, you know. So you can get aggravated as well. You can do anything. You can do the greatest thing of all, which is to die. Two great things in this worldly life: to be born and to die. You can't do one, but you can do the other. Actually not, but you imagine yourself, so it seems you can also pass away. But can you birth yourself? So there's the teaching on no self. You can't born yourself, you can't die yourself, so what is this thing that you have nothing to do with, that you identify with?
Lights on. There's no lights on and there's no one home. Yeah.
And that's a total lie, of course. That's just total lie. And also claiming to be enlightened. You know, this body is enlightened, this mind is enlightened, and that's just nonsense. It's total nonsense. And it's self-referential, which is the worst thing that we can do, is to be self-referential about these teachings, unless it's from a very humanistic way. So it's appealing to people that haven't practiced seriously, that haven't been in relationship with masters, that have a very shallow understanding of the Dharma. This is why they can do that with this Hindu Advaita Vedanta sect, because it's basically a dead sect, an unsuccessful sect.
I spent so long trying to not identify with me, and then
as the awareness thing,
as the body, as a sort of physical form.
Right.
And then there was a lot of time spent. Now there's time spent trying not to identify with not me.
Yeah, trying to identify as not identified.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Tail chasing, isn't it?
there's no solution. There's nowhere to grasp, to cling
Right.
on to. There's nothing
Right.
to identify with. I'm looking at you now for an answer.
I know. Isn't it so aggravating that there's nothing in the way? Isn't it so annoying that there's nothing in the way and that freedom is already? I wanted it to be over there, then I could chase it. I want the thrill of the hunt. If it's already, what can I do about that? It's already. It's already the chase, it's already the waiting, it's already those cyclic thought patterns that habitually run around looking for something else. Freedom is that already, and that's totally disempowering. It could be infuriatingly available. Yeah.
There's a sort of all that investment though in, the hunt, as you say. There's a lot of investment in that, and you think, well, if there's no quarry, then that can be a real.
Right.
It is a bugger. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Liberation, so-called liberation, can be the most disappointing thing ever. Yeah.
But only for the thing that thought it was.
The illusion of going somewhere else. Yes. Yeah. To reveal that this whole time it was already.
And I think the mind can be so creative and imaginative, and it can imagine like a I don't know, golden rain or a rainbow and a nice, beautiful landscape. Since we're children, we get fed these kind of images of, paradise, I suppose. And I think when you feel the message of non-duality, it feels like bliss, it feels like love, and that the mind can then invent an image of bliss and love, which looks like something. It's a concept. And then you look around, and no offence to Tatiana's living room, it is beautiful, but you look around in sort of the present reality and you think, well, where's my magical unicorn?
Right,
and I know
right.
that's quite a childlike way of looking at it,
something...
that idea that there's something out there, because actually there's not.
Like, this isn't good enough, isn't it? Like, this isn't good enough. I want the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Which is sort of, when you say it like that, it sounds.
So there are good elements to this teaching, to this way of teaching, but setting it up and presenting it as an absolute, as an end-all, I'm a Buddha, I'm fully realized, so I'm going to tell you the way that it is, and we're going to leave it at that. That is inherently very problematic and confusing. So I think we'll leave it there for now. Let's go into the Platform Sutra, or the Sixth Patriarch Sutra as we know it. The great master constantly exhorts the Sangha and laity to uphold the Diamond Sutra. Then they may see their own nature and straightway achieve Buddhahood. Hui Neng heard this and desired to go and seek the Dharma, but he recalled that his mother had no support. From past lives, there were karmic conditions which led another man to give Hui Neng a pound of silver so that he could provide clothing and food for his aging mother. The man instructed him further to go to Huang Mei to call upon and bow to the fifth patriarch. So this is a common spiritual barrier that people will encounter, where they want to go and take refuge in the Dharma as far as they know it, more deeply, more fully. But there's karmic conditions where they have to take care of their parents. They don't have the resources to travel. They're not materially or practically able to go and get more training, get more insight, go further along on the path. And of course, it's a nice idea to watch Dharma talks and to read things and to practice meditation at our house. But when it comes down to it, there's a reality of, if you love basketball and you want to be a good basketball player, you need to find not just a basketball court to play on, but other great basketball players to play with. And this is kind of a natural situation, not that complicated. After Hui Neng had made arrangements for his mother's welfare, he took his leave. In less than 30 days, he arrived at Huang Mei and made obeisances to the fifth patriarch, who asked him, "Where are you from, and what do you seek?" Hui Neng replied, "Your disciple is a commoner from Xinqiao in Lingnan, and comes from afar to bow to the master, seeking only to be a Buddha and nothing else." The patriarch said, "You are from Lingnan and are therefore a barbarian. So how can you become a Buddha?" Hui Neng said, "Although there are people from the north and people from the south, there is ultimately no north or south in the Buddha nature. The body of the barbarian and that of the high master are not the same. But what distinction is there in the Buddha nature?" The fifth patriarch wished to continue the conversation, But seeing his disciples gathering on all sides, he ordered his visitor to follow the group off to work. Hui Neng said, Hui Neng informs the High Master that this disciple's mind constantly produces wisdom and is not separate from the self-nature. That itself is the field of blessing. It has not yet been decided what work the High Master will instruct me to do. The fifth patriarch said, Barbarian, your faculties are too sharp. Do not speak further, but go to the back courtyard. Hui Neng withdrew to the back courtyard, where a cultivator ordered him to split firewood and thresh rice. More than 8 months had passed when the patriarch one day suddenly saw Hui Neng and said, I think these views of yours can be of use, but fear that evil people may harm you. For that reason, I have not spoken with you. Did you understand the situation? Hui Neng replied, Your disciple knew the master's intention and has stayed out of the front hall so that others might not notice him. Commentary. As soon as the sixth patriarch made arrangements for his mother's welfare, he left. Some 30 days later, he arrived at the east side of Shuangfang Mountain at Tungchan Monastery. During his journey, he had no false thoughts, and so he was unaware of how much time had passed before he arrived at Huangmei. The master was 22 years old at the time. When the great master asked from where he had come, Hui Neng told him that he was from the south, from Sin Chao. I don't want anything at all, he said. I only want to be a Buddha. All the rest is irrelevant. The fifth patriarch said, You are a southerner, and southerners are all barbarians. The word barbarian is in Chinese Ke Liao. Ke is dog-like animal with an extremely short snout. Liao refers to the coarse people of the borderlands. Basically, this means that those who cannot understand the principles of being human belong to the category of animals. And how can you become a Buddha? Asked the fifth patriarch. The sixth patriarch answered him promptly. Although people are from the north and from the south, he said, the Buddha nature is one and is everywhere the same. The fifth patriarch's disciples were gathered all around, so he said no more. He simply told the sixth patriarch, Good, you have come. Now go to work with the others. Hurry off. Hui Neng said his own mind always produced wisdom. This wisdom is produced from one's own self-nature. And the fields of blessings are not separate from it. I do not yet know what the master wants me to do, he said. The patriarch heard Hui Neng talking this way and said, This barbarian has sharp roots. He cautioned Hui Neng to be more discreet and not talk so much. Speak no more, he said. Go back to the courtyard. In the back courtyard, a cultivator told Hui Neng what to do. When people first come to a place, they are always bullied. This disciple, who had not yet left home, said to Hui Neng, You, every day you must cut wood, build the fire, and cook the food. Here's an axe, and be sure to cut kindling too. Besides that, every day you must thresh the rice. Over 8 months later, the patriarch saw Hui Neng working on the threshing ground and said to him, I think that your wisdom and opinions can be used, but fearing jealous people might harm you, I have not spoken with you too much. Did you know that? Hui Neng said, I understand. I have not dared go into the front Dharma hall to speak with the master, lest others notice my actions or the master's compassion toward me. So as we begin to approach this world of Buddhism and world of Dharma, we're entering into something that's a little bit different from TikTok videos of women shaking their ass, from McDonald's and Coca-Cola, from corporate lobbyists designing the way our tax dollars are spent, from the overall American culture of slavery, bad white men, government, corporations, a culture that's built on slavery and genocide and white supremacy. And I don't say that in a way to be offensive. I just say that to bring us towards a more self-reflective way of looking at the culture and community that we come from. Because we have a certain, it's just like English, just like the language that we speak. There's a certain culture. There's a certain culture that goes along with the dynamics of our mind, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world, the things that we know about, the things that we don't know about. The problem we find ourselves in is a kind of hyper-restrained and hyper-densified sense of self that sees everything under the veil or under the perception that we've already rigidly been established in. So that is to say that there are other walks of life. There are other ways of understanding ourselves and the world. There are other ways of understanding the nature of the mind, the nature of reality, and the nature of dealing with our suffering or our mental stratum of experiences. So Western psychology is one way to understand the mind. African shamanism has another way of understanding the mind. I apologize for my vaguity. I don't know so much about African psychology. The tradition of Buddhism has another way entirely of understanding the mind that is not referential or doesn't exist in reference to Western psychology or Western culture. So even that we have this text in a language that we can understand is a kind of really nice thing. And it does go in line with broadening the mind, opening the heart, being open to different perspectives and different dynamics of human experience that aren't based in if we were a firefighter or a police officer, or we grew up in a $1 million home, or we grew up with a single mother, etc. So it's not that this different tradition invalidates our own tradition, but rather that it gives us an opportunity to lay down the special importance that we've given to what we know and what we understand up to this point. And I emphasize a lot this not understanding and this not knowing, because if for whatever reason we find a degree of curiosity about what happens to be going on anywhere with anyone, as much as we are willing and able to not understand, we will be able to develop our understanding that doesn't directly come from our biases and preconceptions and general vague value judgments about this person and that situation and how that relates to all of our egoic reactivity. So in some sense it's academic, but in another sense it's more of an application of humanism confronting a diverse spectrum of ways of looking at the same thing, right? So Buddhism offers us a very different view, a very different perspective from our American culture and American system of believing and thinking that is contrast to the sense of self or the sense of soul that we find in Christianity. Sutra. So this is the sutra and the commentary. One day, the patriarch summoned his disciples together and said, "I have something to say to you. For people in the world, the matter of birth and death is a great one. All day long you seek fields of blessings only. You do not try to get out of the bitter sea of birth and death. If you are confused about your self-nature, how can blessings save you? Commentary. The fifth patriarch said, regardless of whether you are extremely rich or bitterly poor, you cannot avoid birth and death. Consequently, you should know how you were born. If this question of birth and death is not resolved, life is dim and confused. And you are confused with coming and going. You know, it's a kind of laughter that can bring you to tears, isn't it? Yeah. Right, because there's maybe just looking at the history of Western culture, there's a colonial disposition, you know, for the history that we know about, where Spain and Portugal and England and the U.S. kind of went around to these different places. They had more advanced technology, and so they used that technology to dominate and exploit those people and those resources, even to the point of genocide, you know, if they weren't amenable to like slavery or being enslaved in those conditions. You know, so like for African people, we say, well, African people were able to be made slaves, but Native American people weren't able to be made slaves. So we give them, you know, a little bit kind of credence for that or extra value for that. When in reality, it's a lot easier to enslave someone when they're removed from their homeland versus to enslave someone in their homeland. So that's partly why the genocide was perpetrated on the Native American people more so than it was perpetrated on the African people. And then when we approach these new paradigms or these new environments or these new situations, we actually already have an implicit bias of the way that we approach new situations. So we kind of put our bias of a way of approaching culturally, historically, into someone else's way of approaching, and then we kind of try to justify or reason someone else's way of sharing according to our biases for why we would share about that, right? Why we would say something like that, so that we can also be dominating or controlling. Whereas we may just as well, in another universe or another dimension, we might have been going to these countries to actually cooperate with them. We may have only used violence to facilitate cooperation and community and resource sharing rather than, you know, exploitation. So the fifth patriarch said, regardless of whether you are extremely rich or bitterly poor, you cannot avoid birth and death. Consequently, you should know how you were born. If this question of birth and death is not resolved, life is dim and confused, and you are confused with all of this coming and going. You do nothing but seek merit among the gods and among humans. You do not know how to seek wisdom. Thus, you swirl and drift in the suffering sea of birth and death. It is said that one who cultivates wisdom and does not cultivate merit is like an arahat with an empty begging bowl. He is very wise, but no one makes offerings to him. But if one cultivates merit and neglects wisdom, he is just like a big elephant wearing a pearl necklace beneath the adornments of blessing. He is stupid and will never solve the problem of birth and death. How beautiful and insightful that is, huh? Sutra. Each of you go back and look into your own wisdom and use the prajna nature of your own original mind to compose a verse. Submit it to me so that I may look at it. So this is the fifth patriarch, the master of the temple, saying to all the disciples, everybody at the temple, go and compose a verse and give it to me so that I can see what level of wisdom you're at. If you understand the great meaning, the robe and dharma, basically the authorization or the transmission of really getting that enlightenment mind, will be passed on to you, and you will become the sixth patriarch. Hurry off, do not delay. Thinking and considering is of no use in this matter. When seeing your own nature, it is necessary to see it at the very moment of speaking. One who does that perceives as one who does, as does one who wields a sword in the height of battle. Commentary. Verse here is the Sanskrit word gata. A gata is composed of lines of uniform length, though the length may vary from gata to gata. So we may kind of unconsciously be aggressive to that which is presented before us that we don't understand. And we may be interested in it for a time, but if continuously confronted by that, we may actually try to find ways to be aggressive to that which we don't understand, such as minimizing that as being inherently less than what we understand. So like saying that Native American people's morality was inherently less or equal to, we try kind of all the social justice and stuff, even the conservatives or the right-wing people sometimes to be a little bit generous, they say, well, it was equal, so the war was fair. But it's a way for us to be aggressive to being confronted by or confronting something that we don't understand, rather than taking responsibility for our own interest and curiosity, and then, not being aggressive to the notion that there are a lot of things in this world, there are a lot of things in life that may very well apply to us or be able to bring benefit to us that we don't necessarily understand. And all we have to do is look at something like the American education system to see how little in general, as like a societal consensus, we value education. There's some value to it, but we're not trying to create the best schools to create the most empowered people. Working as a teacher is one of the lowest paid jobs in America, with, I think most of us would say, the highest degree of responsibility that someone can have as an adult is to help children, is to help train the next generation of people to be empowered, to think for themselves, to be contemplative, to know how to deal with their own emotions and psychology. Go quickly, said the fifth patriarch. Go as if a fire were about to overtake you. Do not dawdle and procrastinate, saying, oh, I cannot do it today. I will do it tomorrow instead. And then the next day saying, not today either, perhaps tomorrow. It sounds like me and going to the gym or doing any kind of physical movement. Do not keep putting it off, and do not try to think about it. It is useless to use your discriminating mind. If you have deep prajna wisdom, you understand the moment you hear the words spoken. Just as one grabs a weapon and confronts the oncoming enemy, so do you perceive. You can see your nature in the same immediate way. Sutra. The assembly received this order and withdrew, saying to one another, we of the assembly do not need to clear our minds and use our intellect to compose a verse to submit to the High Master. What use would there be in this? Shen Sui is our senior instructor and teaching transmitter. Certainly he should be the one to obtain it. It would be not only improper for us to compose a verse, but a waste of effort as well. Hearing this, everyone put their mind to rest and said, henceforth we will rely on Master Shen Sui. Why vex ourselves writing verses? Commentary. They went away to other courts, other gardens, and other buildings, saying to themselves, why worry about writing this verse? We do not need to waste the effort. I believe the people who spoke this way were of Shen Sui's party. Why did they not write verses? Because Shen Sui's followers were trying to make him the patriarch. All of his followers, disciples, Dharma, brothers, friends, and relatives contrived to set up the position for Shen Sui. They convinced everyone else not to write verses, because if anyone else wrote verses, then perhaps Shen Sui might not get to be the next patriarch. Patriarch is like the leader, the recognized authoritative example of what's the standard understanding or the true understanding. They secretly passed it around and whispered behind the scenes, like friends of a candidate for president who say, hey, vote for this one. He can be president. They spread it about and stuffed the ballot box. Convinced that they had no learning, the assembly decided it was useless to write verses. Swayed by the rumors, they said, the senior seated Shen Sui is second to the abbot. His literary skill is good. His virtue is high. He lectures on the sutras and speaks Dharma for us. Certainly he should become the sixth patriarch. When the assembly heard Shen Sui's followers saying things like, if we write verses, they will be very unpolished and certainly not good enough to submit, they all decided not to write verses themselves. They didn't want to compete with Shen Sui, their superior. And this is a kind of groupthink that we might find in a lot of different environments and circumstances, where there's a kind of communal consensus that our individual expression of our understanding is inherently not valid compared to the people who seem to be holding a standardized version of what's going on and the way that we should all move forward. And of course, the highest leader in our lives is always ourselves. But when we're not thinking about ourselves because maybe that's too stressful or we'd rather do something else, we're looking to who is the holding the banner or the right or the authority of a mutually standardized consensus about what's going on and how to move forward with that. And so all of these people in this assembly, they decided not to submit their own understanding or their own verses because they already had recognized some particular person's opinion as being the best opinion, only second to, their selves. Sutra. Shen Sui then thought, the others are not submitting verses because I am their teaching transmitter. I must compose a verse and submit it to the High Master. If I do not submit a verse, how will the High Master know whether the views and understanding in my mind are deep or shallow? If my intention in submitting the verse is to seek the Dharma, that is good. But if it is to grasp the patriarchy, that is bad. For how would that be different from the mind of a common person coveting the holy position? But if I do not submit a verse, in the end I will not obtain the Dharma. This is a terrible difficulty. Commentary. The fifth patriarch had announced that in order to obtain the Dharma, one must compose a verse. Shen Sui knew that if he did not submit one, the fifth patriarch would not know whether Shen Sui had wisdom, and he could not transmit the Dharma to him. Shen Sui fretted and worried. What shall I do? This is very hard. It is just too difficult. Sutra. In front of the fifth patriarch's hall were 3 corridors. Their walls were to be frescoed by court artist Lu Chen with stories from the Lankavatara Sutra, and with pictures portraying in detail the lives of the 5 patriarchs, so the patriarchs might be venerated by future generations. Commentary. A court artist is one appointed as an official to the imperial court because of his talent. Namo Guan Shi Yin Pu Sa. 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 The title of the Lankavatara Sutra has 2 meanings: city and cannot be gone to. This city, located behind Malaya Mountain, is inaccessible to those without spiritual powers. Shakyamuni Buddha used his spiritual powers to go there and speak the Lankavatara Sutra for the benefit of those who had spiritual powers. The court artist was to depict the miraculous, inconceivable, wonderful transformations which took place in the assembly on Lanka Mountain. The court artist was also to paint pictures illustrating the flow of the Dharma from Great Master Bodhidharma, the first patriarch, to the Great Master Hui Ko, the second patriarch, and onward from generation to generation. to the fifth patriarch, Great Master Hung Jen. The paintings would remain in the world so that future generations might receive benefit from respecting and making offerings to them. Sutra. After composing his verse, Shen Sui made several attempts to submit it, but whenever he reached the front hall, his mind became agitated and distraught, and his entire body became covered with perspiration. He did not dare submit it, although in the course of 4 days he made 13 attempts. Commentary. Shen Sui's students were not greedy to become patriarch, but Shen Sui had a great desire for the position. Whenever he tried to submit his verse, he went a little crazy. What am I going to do? Is this verse right or not? Can I submit it? He did not know if it was right or wrong. Maybe, is it this way or is it that way? Maybe it isn't, maybe it is, more or less. Endless questions flooded his mind, making him extremely nervous. Every time he tried to hand it in, he broke out in a heavy sweat. Why? It was a huge gamble. If he failed, he would not be a patriarch, but if he passed, he would. Fear of failure caused his extreme agitation. It was really suffering, really hard work. It is not easy to be a patriarch. Look at how much effort he expended. For 4 entire days and nights, he never shut his eyes. He just kept trying to submit his verse. At night, he would go as far as the fifth patriarch's hall, peer around, break out in a sweat, and flee back to his room. During the day, he tried again. In the periods in between, he could not sit, lie down, or sleep. And when he tried to eat, he couldn't swallow. He went before the patriarch's hall 13 times and still did not submit the verse. Now, when I give you a quiz, you write the answers very promptly and hand them in. Suppose I were to give you a patriarch test. I think your hands would tremble so that you could not write out the answers. Finally, after so many attempts, when Shen Sui had almost worried himself to death, he thought, "Hey, get a hold of yourself. Calm down and think this thing over. Meditate and enter samadhi." Sutra. Then he thought, "This is not as good as writing it on the wall so that the High Master might see it suddenly. If he says it is good, I will come forward, bow, and say, 'Su did it.' If it does not pass, then I have spent my years on this mountain in vain, receiving veneration from others. And as to further cultivation, what can I say?" That night, in the 3rd watch, holding a candle, he secretly wrote the verse on the wall of the south corridor to show what his mind had seen. And so these verses and these sutras, they tell us a story of people that are not totally unlike us. They come from a different time. They may be a different race from us. They may be a different culture than us. They may speak a different language than us. But where we can find parallels is in their example of being serious spiritual practitioners. They were serious enough to be monks. They were serious enough to take getting it or not getting it to bring them to sweats, to bring them to not being able to sleep or lie down or eat. And so they set this standard for us in our own spiritual seeking to see these kind of environments as places where we may find our spiritual friends and where we may find ourselves if we take the path very, very seriously. Commentary. So this is a situation where Master Hui Neng, this illiterate wood salesman from the south of the country has heard a text, has heard a writing from the Diamond Sutra while doing his work, and he gained a great insight, a great awakening, a great enlightenment. And so he went and sought out this other great master, to figure this all out, or to solidify his understanding of being a Buddha, of enlightenment, to go towards that which he found to have so much value. When he got there, the master said, look, you've got some really powerful and interesting opinions and a sharp mind. I want you to be careful here, because there's a possibility that people could try to harm you, because you're interfering with the status quo and what's currently going on here. So be discreet, go and work. You're welcome to stay here. And, basically saying, I'll figure this out. Go and take some time. Welcome. Then this great master, the master of the temple, decides, okay, I'm going to check with all of my disciples. I'm going to give them a challenge or an invitation to become the next patriarch, the next master of the temple. And I'm going to do that by asking everybody to write a verse on their insight, their understanding of enlightenment. And so all these people at the temple look up to this one particular guy who's a teacher there, but not the master, this Shen Sui guy. And so everybody says, we don't need to write a verse because Shen Sui is our teacher. And then Shen Sui is saying, okay, I've got to write this verse, but he's very nervous, he's very self-conscious about it. And eventually he decides, okay, I'm just going to write the verse on the chalkboard outside the teacher's room, and I'm not going to reveal myself unless it's correct, to kind of get out of his anxiety and his fear. So commentary. That's it, he said with relief. I will write it on the wall, and when he sees it, he will say, this is truly a fine verse, truly wonderful, and I will admit that I wrote it. But if he says, this is too confused, it is nothing but useless trash, then I will know that I have wasted my time here on the mountain. He crept stealthily, like a thief in the night. He carried just a little candle, for if the light were too bright, someone might have seen him. This is the verse that he wrote, Sutra. The body is a Bodhi tree, means like a tree of awakening. The mind is like a bright mirror stand. Time and again brush it clean, and let no dust alight. After writing this verse, Shen Sui returned to his room, and the others did not know what he had done. Then he thought, if the fifth patriarch sees the verse tomorrow and is pleased, it will mean that I have an affinity with the Dharma. If he says that it does not pass, it will mean that I am confused by heavy karmic obstacles from past lives, and that I am not fit to obtain the Dharma. It is difficult to fathom the sage's intentions. In his room, he thought it over and could not sit or sleep peacefully right through to the fifth watch. So that's like very early morning. Commentary. He bounded back to his room 2 steps at a time, as if he were being chased, but quietly, taking great silent leaps, like an expert military spy. He was afraid that if anyone saw him, they would know he wrote the verse. But no one saw him. No one knew, not even the ghosts and spirits. If he likes this verse, thought Shen Sui, then I must have conditions with the wonderful mind-to-mind seal of the Buddhas, and it is my destiny to be patriarch. But if it does not pass, my confusion from the karma created in past lives must be a heavy obstruction. It is hard to figure out what he will say. There is just no way to know. Actually, his verse was not bad, but he had not fully understood. So after he returned to his room, he was still uneasy. Sutra. The patriarch already knew that Shen Sui had not yet entered the gate and seen his own nature. At daybreak, the patriarch called court artist Lu Chen to fresco the wall of the south corridor. Suddenly he saw the verse and said to the court artist, "There is no need to paint. I am sorry that you have been wearied by coming so far, but the Diamond Sutra says, whatever has marks is empty and false." How about that? Wait. Instead, leave this verse for people to recite and uphold. Those who cultivate in accordance with this verse will not fall into the evil destinies and will attain great merit. He then ordered the disciples to light incense and bow before it and to recite it, thus enabling them to see their own nature. The disciples all recited it and exclaimed, "Excellent." Commentary. If you cultivate according to the principles contained in this verse, said the fifth patriarch, you will not fall into rebirth in the three evil paths of the hells, animals, or hungry ghosts, and you will receive many benefits. So that's one of the problems of a society without religion. So it's one of the problems of American society, where we don't have many principles and practices from religion anymore because we're a very secular society, and even the secular education of the society basically dismantles deep belief or deep connection with the principles of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, because there's this whole unscientific, religious, supernatural view about it that the school system basically says, you can't take that stuff seriously, so you can't look very deeply into it for most people. And then in the other side, this aggrandization of science, which is very complicated, very deep, very specific. And the science of the mind is like psychology, but most people don't have any kind of connection with a degree in psychology of understanding deep psychological principles. You go to a psychologist to get like SSRI medication, but we don't generally culturally have many deep or practical principles and practices collectively anymore. We're just kind of statistically convenient consumers and voters at this point, generally. It's like what our culture is producing. So that's also why something like this can be so confronting, because we have basically no parallel to that as general consumers, as general people, Not to speak of the lacking of something like modern psychology in curing the symptom but not curing the illness, and just modern medicine as well, right? Sutra. At the third watch, the patriarch called Shen Sui into the hall and asked him, "Did you write this verse?" Shen Sui said, "Yes. In fact, Sui did it. He does not dare lay claim to the position of patriarch, but hopes the High Master will be compassionate and see whether or not this disciple has a little bit of wisdom." The patriarch said, "The verse which you wrote shows that you have not yet seen your original nature, but are still outside the gate. With such views and understanding, you may seek supreme Bodhi, awakening, enlightenment, but in the end you will not obtain it. Supreme Bodhi must be obtained at the very moment of speaking, in recognizing the original mind at all times. In every thought, you yourself will see that the 10,000 dharmas are unblocked. In one truth is all truth, and the 10,000 states are of themselves thus, as they are. The thusness of the mind, just that is true reality. If seen in this way, it is indeed the self-nature of Supreme Bodhi. Commentary. The patriarch chose the same hour at which Shen Sui had written the verse on the wall the night before. He secretly called him in and said, "Psst, was it you who wrote that verse?" "Yes, yes," Shen Sui whispered back. "Yes, in fact, I, Sui, wrote it. I do not seek the status of patriarch, but your verse shows that you are still an outsider," said the fifth patriarch. "You have not yet seen your nature. As soon as you speak the words, know your original nature. When you understand the mind and see your own nature, you know that the nature is not produced and not destroyed, for at all times all dharmas are perfectly fused, without the slightest bit of obstruction. There is no place where all dharmas are not identical. When you understand one truth, all truth is understood. The 10,000 externals are all produced from the state which is thus unmoving. And within the mind which is thus unmoving, true reality is to be found. Seen in this way, this state is the original nature exactly. It is the highest enlightenment. And so, in response to Shen Sui, I wrote a verse myself. Because of the way 10,000 things are born, one who obtains it penetrates the mystery oneself. Awakened, the basic substance is fathomed. Bodhi does not decrease or increase. Sutra. Go and think it over for a day or two. Compose another verse and bring it to me to see. If you have been able to enter the gate, I will transmit the robe and dharma to you. Shen Sui made obeisances and left. Several days passed, but he was unable to compose a verse. His mind was agitated and confused, and his thoughts and mood were uneasy. He was as if in a dream. Whether walking or sitting down, he could not be happy. Commentary. After the great master had explained that the Bodhi self-nature cannot be sought with the mind that wants to take advantage of things, he told Shen Sui, if you obtain the original substance, become enlightened and understand the mind and see your self-nature, entering the gate of the Buddha Dharma so that you are no longer on the outside, I will transmit the Dharma to you. Enter the gate means understand the mind and see your own nature. And in a lot of ways, this is like, it's almost like a king, in this sense, a Dharma king or an enlightenment king, deciding who he's going to give the kingdom to, who he's going to give the right to rule to, but in a dharmic sense of realizing the truth that the Buddha was sharing. As the days passed, Shen Sui gradually went insane. Neither his mood nor his thoughts would calm down. Although he was unable to fall asleep, he was as if in a dream. He didn't know what he was doing because his desire to become patriarch was so great. I believe that after he failed the initial test and then was unable to compose another verse, he even considered suicide. Sutra. 2 days later, a young boy chanting that verse passed by the threshing room. Hearing it for the first time, so Hui Neng is just chopping wood and threshing rice and just kind of, living at the monastery. Hui Neng's not even aware of any of this going on because he's not a monk. He's not like an important person of the temple, even though the master has said, your faculties are sharp, you have very good wisdom, be careful because people might want to harm you because they're jealous of your position, your understanding, your faculties. So hearing it for the first time, Hui Neng knew that the writer had not yet seen his original nature. Although he had not yet received a transmission of the teaching, he already understood its profound meaning. He asked the boy, "What verse are you reciting?" "Barbarian, you know nothing," replied the boy. "The great master has said that birth and death are a profound concern for people in the world. Desiring to transmit the robe and dharma, he ordered his disciples to compose verses and bring them to him to see. The person who has awakened to the profound meaning will inherit the robe and dharma and become the sixth patriarch. Our senior, Shen Sui, wrote this verse without marks on the wall of the south corridor. The great master ordered everyone to recite it, for to cultivate in accord with this verse is to avoid falling into the evil destinies and is of great merit." So we can see some elements of things not being how they appear, and also things apparently not being the way that they should be. And all of this seems to be under the direction and the discernment of this totally enlightened master, which should be doing things the way that they should be done, right? Everything should be completely on the level as we would determine it. And in the same way, you're seeing someone, Hui Neng, who's been recognized by the master, and even a boy just waddling through calls this person a barbarian. So the master sees this barbarian as having a great degree of realization, wisdom, and skill, and other people don't even notice that. So it's also something I try to bring up, I try to share about this, the faculty of appearances, right? But also the problematic nature of relying on appearances based on our feel and our think so as ordinary people. The emptiness of appearances is important when it comes to enlightenment and insight, right? As it says in the Dharma Sutra, few pages back, whatever has marks is empty and false. Marks is these elements of appearance. So whatever has elements of appearing, aspects, colors, sounds, smells, taste, touch, coarse and subtle, is empty and false, fake. Commentary. A young lad ventured close to the threshing floor, where the sixth patriarch was working, singing as he walked. The body is a Bodhi tree, the mind like a bright mirror stand. Time and time again, brush it clean, let no dust alight. The youth was chanting Shen Sui's verse because he wished to obtain great benefit, avoid the three evil destinies of rebirth, and see his nature. When the sixth patriarch asked the boy what he was reciting, the boy replied, "You barbarian." Don't you know that the fifth patriarch said that all of the problems people face, the problem of birth and death, is the most grave? A verse without marks is one which reveals that its author is not attached to marks. You really have no good roots, the boy said to the sixth patriarch. After so many days you still don't know? You are useless, capable only of toiling at bitter work. All you can do is pound rice. You shouldn't let such a fine opportunity slip by. Listen closely, and I will tell you what has happened and teach you this verse so that you too can become enlightened and see your nature. Pay attention and rely on this verse as you cultivate, so that in your next life you won't have to endure such suffering as you endure now. You won't have to be a horse or a cow, or fall among the other animals or into the hells. At the very least, you'll be a wealthy and respected person of good fortune. The youth's heart wasn't bad at all. And so Hui Neng is hearing this, knowing that the person who wrote that verse hasn't seen their nature. And this boy with a very good heart is, trying to tell Hui Neng to recite this verse from someone who hasn't seen their nature to someone who has, so that they'll be able to see their nature. So you can see how all of these things can be seemingly quite mixed up or dynamic, or not the way that it should be. Everybody should be able to understand the way that it is, but they aren't. Sutra. Hui Neng said, I too would like to recite it to create an affinity, superior one. I have been pounding rice here for over 8 months and have not yet been to the front hall. I hope that the superior one will lead me before the verse to pay homage. The boy then led him to the verse to bow. Hui Neng said, Hui Neng cannot read. Please, superior one, read it to me. Then an official from Chao, named Chang Ji-yung, read it loudly. After hearing it, Hui Neng said, I too have a verse. Will the official please write it for me? The official replied, You too can write a verse? That is strange. Commentary. The boy said, Listen to me and I will teach you. The body is a Bodhi tree. Can you remember that? The mind is like a bright mirror stand. You should remember that. Don't forget. Time and again brush it clean. Let no dust alight. If you can remember that verse clearly and study as you chant, you'll certainly receive an efficacious response. Because the lad had been so considerate, the sixth patriarch referred to him as Superior One, a title which is ordinarily reserved for one's master. People who have left home often call their teachers Superior One, acknowledging their high achievement. And this is another dynamic as well. This is the sixth patriarch. This is somebody who's seen their nature. This is somebody who's been recognized by the master. And so this boy comes along, kind of callously and irreverently, calls this great practitioner a barbarian because of the boy's good-heartedness, shares, what he understands to be the right teachings. And because the sixth patriarch, Hui Neng, sees the goodness and the kindness of this boy, he calls him Superior One. I would think, my kind of inclination would say, okay, he's calling him Superior One is a kind of mockery. But what if it's not? What if it's a recognition of the positive qualities and the kindness of that boy in sharing? Then the sixth patriarch said, The layman Hui Neng is truly useless, for he can't read a single word. Superior One, would you please recite it for me? Having heard the verse, he said, Well, I have a verse too, but I'm unable to write it. What can I do? Please, good official, layman Chang, will you write it out for me? The official was wide-eyed with surprise. He looked scornfully at the barbarian and said, "Ha! You can write a verse? This is very strange. In my whole life, I have never heard of an illiterate who can write verses." Sutra. Hui Neng said to the official, "If you wish to study the Supreme Bodhi, do not slight the beginner. The lowest people may have the highest wisdom. The highest people may have the least wisdom. If you slight others, you create limitless, unbounded offenses." The official said, "Recite your verse and I will write it out for you. If you obtain the Dharma, you must take me across first. Do not forget these words." Hui Neng's verse reads, "Originally, Bodhi has no tree. The bright mirror has no stand. Originally, there is not a single thing. Where can dust alight?" When this verse had been written, the followers all were startled, and without exception cried out to one another, "Strange indeed! One cannot judge a person by his appearance. How can it be that after so little time he has become a bodhisattva in the flesh?" Commentary. Originally, layman Lu had not planned to say a thing. But if he had remained silent, no one would have helped him write a verse. So in reply to the mocking of layman Chang, the master said, "If you wish to study the highest Bodhi, do not ridicule those who are studying the Buddha Dharma for the first time. It may well be that those who appear to be the lowest and stupidest have the highest wisdom. For those who have truly great wisdom may act as if they have no wisdom at all. No matter what they are asked, they may reply, 'I don't know.' This is an example of the great wisdom which is like stupidity. For instance, when I ask a question of my disciples, they often say, 'I don't know.' When they first came to study, they said, 'I know everything.' Once I met a person who said he knew everything. I asked, 'How can you know everything?' 'If you know all there is to know, I'll ask you a question.' He said, 'What is your question?' I replied, 'Do you know how many grains of rice you swallowed at lunch today?' 'No, I didn't count them,' he admitted. Your not counting is just not knowing, I said. Those who do the most menial work often have wisdom excelling that of people in high positions. Then again, those who ordinarily have great wisdom may have times when their wisdom is suffocated by thoughts of desire. Okay, said the official. That's right. You certainly speak with principle. Now, what is your verse? Recite it, and I will write it out. You don't have to say another word, but you must remember to take me across first, because if I don't write your verse, no one will know of it. It's interesting. The moment that we read the verse from Hui Neng, quite a few people left. Like a statistical anomaly of people left. I can see it, but you can't. Originally, Bodhi has no tree. Bodhi is just the way of enlightenment, and that's all there is to it. How can there be a tree? If there is a tree, Bodhi becomes a mere thing, a place of attachment. Originally, Bodhi doesn't have anything. If you say you are enlightened, what is enlightenment like? Is it green or yellow? Is it red or white? Can you speak of the appearance of Bodhi when it has no appearance? The bright mirror has no stand. You may say the mind is like a bright mirror stand, but there is actually no stand at all. If you have a stand, you have a place where you can dwell. But you should produce a thought which is nowhere supported. How can you have a stand? If you have a stand, then you have a dwelling place, a place where you are attached. Therefore, the bright mirror has no stand. What is the appearance? No appearance. Originally, there is not a single thing. Basically, there is nothing at all. No style, no picture, no shape or mark. Originally, there is nothing at all. Where can dust alight? Since there isn't anything, where does the dust come from? Basically, you have no dwelling place. The essential meaning of the verse is this: you should produce a thought which is nowhere supported. There should be no attachment at all. This was precisely the Buddha's meaning when, upon becoming enlightened, he said, "All living beings have the wisdom and virtuous characteristics of the thus come one." It is merely because of false thinking and attachment that they are unable to certify to the attainment of them. This was spoken specifically to instruct people to put aside attachment, to produce an unsupported thought. If you are attached, what are you up to, huh? Now you are attached, but in the future you will die or not. What will you be attached to when you die? All the bhikshus, laymen, and assembled disciples stood in astonishment and whispered among themselves, Hey, does he have a verse too? Oh, it's really true. You can't judge people by appearances. This rice thresher, layman Lu, can compose verses. We can no longer slander him and call him a barbarian. Why, he hasn't been here very long, they continued. But how can you deny that he's a flesh-body bodhisattva? Actually, some were mocking the sixth patriarch, babbling, "Don't look down on him. He's a flesh-body bodhisattva." Perhaps there were arhats in the assembly who intentionally made such comments so that people would look closely and clearly recognize that he actually was a flesh-body bodhisattva. Again, there were those who said, "This is truly a flesh-body bodhisattva," but meant it only as sarcasm and light-hearted ridicule, for they still didn't know if the verse was correct. Now, in terms of the correctness of the verse and how we approach these kinds of things, we can't exclude the context. These are serious practitioners, these are monks and nuns, these are devotees, these are long-term meditators, these are people that have fully given themselves to this practice path. That's the situation of what's going on here. You know, it's an essential element of the story. So if we try to apply our lackadaisical lives and kind of say that context is the same, it's not. So don't try to mimic, don't try to be like the people in the story, because it's a different context that we can empathize with, we can possibly understand, but it's not our context. Everyone was chattering, exchanging comments, making such a racket that the fifth patriarch came to the hall and demanded, "What are you doing? What are you up to?" "This rice thresher, this barbarian can write verses," they stammered. Sutra. The fifth patriarch saw the astonished assembly and feared that they might become dangerous. Accordingly, he erased the verse with his shoe, saying, "This one too has not yet seen his nature." The assembly agreed. Commentary. The gathering was so excited, the fifth patriarch feared that someone might even try to assassinate Layman Lu. This sentence of text proves that people with twisted hearts, followers of Shen Sui, were already locked in a fierce battle for positions of power. If the Dharma and the patriarchate were transmitted publicly to anyone other than Shen Sui, that person would have been murdered on the spot. But they didn't know that the fifth patriarch was a bright-eyed one, who, reading their scheming minds, so to protect the sixth patriarch, he erased the verse and said, "This man's verse is also incorrect." Perhaps some of you are thinking, the fifth patriarch lied. First, he said that if one cultivated in accord with Shen Sui's verse, he would not be subject to the three evil destinies, but would gain great benefit and see his own nature. Then the fifth patriarch told everyone that Layman Lu had not really seen his nature, when in truth he had. Isn't that false speech? No. This is a provisional teaching, not false speech. The fifth patriarch spoke to protect the new patriarch. He would not allow the others to harm him. In this way, the Buddha Dharma could remain long in this world and be transmitted far and wide. "Yes," said the followers, "he has not seen his nature." Although they agreed, no one knew whether the verse was right or not. The verse said, "Bodhi is a tree." The second said, "Bodhi has no tree." The first verse said, "The bright mirror has a stand." And the second said, "There is no mirror stand." Which was right? Which was wrong? No one understood. None of them had become enlightened, so they couldn't recognize an enlightened verse. It is like the judging of a doctoral dissertation. If you only have a master's degree, you cannot judge a doctoral dissertation. It is the same with the enlightened and the unenlightened. Since they were not enlightened themselves, the followers did not understand, and so they simply agreed with the master and said, "No, this one has not yet seen his nature." Sutra. The next day the patriarch secretly came to the threshing floor, where he saw Hui Neng pounding rice with a stone tied around his waist. And he said, "A seeker of the way would forget his very life for the Dharma. Is this not the case?" Commentary. The next day everyone was quiet and no longer worried about who was enlightened and who was not. The fifth patriarch secretly left his room and went quickly to the threshing floor to see the great master Hui Neng. As he went, he peered about to see if anyone was looking. Just like Shen Sui when he had finished writing the verse, he ran silently, darting glances over his shoulder to make sure no one saw him. When the fifth patriarch got to the threshing floor, he saw Hui Neng pounding rice. He had tied a stone around his waist and pounded rice so that others could eat. What was he doing? He was practicing the Bodhisattva way, forgetting others and having no notion of self. He did not think, why should I pound rice for you to eat? You don't work. You don't do anything at all. I pound rice all day and it is very difficult. He did not think that way. Instead, he thought, you do not work? Fine, I will do it myself. Just like one of my disciples who is so busy that when he is called to lunch, he says, wait a minute, wait a minute. I really like that kind of disciple, but not everyone can be that way. Isn't that so? The fifth patriarch said, remember this. It ought. It must be this way. You must give up being afraid of difficulty to the point of forgetting to eat. No one knows how many days the sixth patriarch went without eating. No one called him to eat, and he himself forgot about it until he had no strength. He tied a heavy rock around his waist to add weight to his body so that he could pound the rice. I think he used the stone to add to his weight because he had not eaten for some time. However, you should not get attached and think it was definitely like that. On the other hand, do not think it definitely wasn't like that. The profound insight comes precisely from that kind of non-attachment. Sutra. Then the fifth patriarch asked, is the rice ready? Hui Neng replied, the rice has long been ready. It is now waiting only for the sieve. Commentary. This passage in the sixth patriarch's sutra is extremely important. The fifth patriarch found the great master Hui Neng toiling on the threshing floor and asked him, is the rice ready? On one level, the question means, have you finished threshing the rice? On another level, the meaning is, have your efforts been successful? Has your work taken you up the road? Why does the sutra say rice? Because rice is made up of many grains, perfectly shaped, so symbolizing the precious mani jewel of the self-nature. Is the mani jewel of your nature ready? Is the light of your mind full? Is the light of your nature full? Is the light of your body full? When the raw grain is boiled in water, it becomes edible. The patriarch's question means, how is your cultivation of the way? You have been pounding rice and cultivating dhyana meditation. How is your skill? There are many levels of meaning here. The sixth patriarch, of course, understood the fifth patriarch's question, for it is said, one who has gone through knows one who has gone through. Those who do know those who do. The rice has long been ready. My skill was perfected long ago, the sixth patriarch answered. It is now waiting only for the sieve. In threshing rice, a sieve is used to sift out the husks. Here, the sieve represents getting rid of the filth. The fourth chapter of the Lotus Sutra tells of the poor son who spent 20 years getting rid of the filth of the delusions of views and delusions of thoughts. And that's one of the things that, having a meal for ourselves, that from this enlightened pathway perspective, views and thoughts are filth. Views and perspectives and thoughts are filth. That's Buddhism for you. That's Zen for you. That's the Mahayana for you. That's the teaching of the sixth patriarch for you. So you might want to kind of sit with that a little bit. Think about that a little bit. In your continued approach to Buddhism or the way of understanding Zen. The 4th chapter of the Lotus Sutra tells of the poor son who spent 20 years getting rid of the filth of the delusions of views and delusions of thoughts. So there are 88 categories of view delusions which arise when greed and love are produced with respect to externals. And there are 81 categories of thought delusions which arise when confused about principles. One gives rise to discrimination. After the 6th patriarch's spiritual skill was perfected, it still waited for the sieve. He still had to sweep out the filth of the delusions of views and thought. Do you understand now why sutras must be explained? If they were not explained, you would not even know enough to sweep away the filth, and you would be utterly useless. Sutra. The patriarch rapped the pestle 3 times with his staff and left. Hui Neng then knew the patriarch's intention, and at the 3rd watch he went into the patriarch's room. Commentary. The 5th patriarch rapped the pestle 3 times with his staff and left. Old monks who have left the home life to become bhikshus often carry a walking stick. Sometimes these staves are made of twisted vines. The great master Su Yun said, "We go to pick the ivy, lively like a dragon, beating wind and rain, beating empty space." The ivy vine curves and twists like a dragon who by attacking the wind and rain attacks empty space. That is certainly a case of going out to look for trouble. If that vine were as busy as my disciples, it would have no time to beat space and wind. Knock, 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 went the 5th patriarch's staff. And how do you think he left? If you know, then you know. If you don't know, then you must wait until I tell you. He went out with 2 hands behind his back, holding his crooked staff. Why did the patriarch rap 3 times? Do you understand the meaning of that? The 6th patriarch understood right away. The rapping meant, "Come to my room at the 3rd watch, at midnight." This is called speaking the Dharma without words. Here in the meditation hall, for example, when the wooden fish is hit twice, it means walk. Hit once, it means stop and sit down. Hit 3 times, it means meditate, work hard. All that is speaking the Dharma without words. Why did the 5th patriarch carry his staff behind his back? Now you are going to ask me, how do you know he carried it behind his back, since it doesn't say so in the sutra? Well, how do you not know? I know that you don't know. He carried it behind his back to indicate that the 6th patriarch should come in by the back door. Do not let the others see you come in. If the 5th patriarch had said openly, "Come to my room at the 3rd watch and we'll have a little talk," I'm sure that the word would have spread like fire to Shen Sui's ears, and Shen Sui and his disciples would not have been very kind to the 6th patriarch. The 5th patriarch tested the 6th patriarch's wisdom by rapping his staff 3 times and putting it behind his back. The 6th patriarch understood, but no one else did. They were all as if deaf and dumb, without any idea as to what had transpired in this wordless exchange of Dharma. At midnight, as soon as the sixth patriarch entered the room, there was a quick exchange. "What are you doing here?" demanded the fifth patriarch. "But the patriarch told me to come at the third watch," came the reply. "Really? Did I tell you that? How could I have forgotten? What do you think you are doing? Why did you come in the back door instead of the front door?" "Did the master not tell me to use the back entrance?" The fifth patriarch laughed and said, "You are not bad. Really not bad. You are all right. You ask how I know that. I ask, how do you not know it?" The patriarch covered him with his precept sash so they could not be seen, and he explained the Diamond Sutra for him down to the line. One should produce a thought that is nowhere supported. One should produce a thought that is nowhere supported. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining our Buddhist Dharma class today, our 3-hour session. Where did the time go? And wish you all well on your journeys. I hope you're doing good. And see you next time. Okay? Take care and be well. Sadhu. Namo Guan Yin Pusa. Namo Amitofo.